Hi everyone, welcome, and thanks so much for attending. Today, we're going to be talking about turning an organizational nightmare into a dream, or how NX makes framework upgrades a breeze. But first, a bit about me. My name is Altan Stalker, and I'm an engineer at Narwhal. I mainly work on NX Cloud, which you probably just heard about from Kirill's. I'm passionate about web technology, ortholinear keyboards, and taking one hike per year that I'm vastly unprepared for. If you have any questions or comments about this talk, feel free to tweet me at StockAlton. I'm happy to help in any way that I can that's less than 280 characters. Let's talk about JavaScript. It's no secret that the web moves quickly. Most JavaScript frameworks are releasing major updates at least once a year, sometimes aiming for every 6 months. This is awesome for us as developers. New versions mean performance enhancements, new features, bug and security fixes, and the looming feeling of falling too far behind, resulting in your team spending months adapting to breaking changes. Wait, no one's excited about that. But this is a real concern for organizations of all sizes, and maybe even something you've experienced personally. Choosing to delay updates happens often, because it's difficult to get buy-in from leadership, especially when roadmaps are tight and developer resources are strained. So, what happens when materially valuable features make their way into your framework of choice, like Webpack 5 support in Nest.js 11, or API versioning in Nest.js 8. A few years ago, we probably would have just looked at the changelog and sighed. When you've been burned before with the promise of a smooth update, how can you regain trust? The fact is, upgrading JavaScript historically has been painful, unbearable even, which raises the question, what's the best way to approach these upgrades? Well, how does your organization handle CI/CD, or linting, or code style? For the sake of everyone's teams, I really hope this is the answer that you came up with. Automation. If we know what parts of the Surface API are changing, why not detect those in our code and fix them before it's an issue? This concept is already done at a much more granular level with tools like TS and ESLint. By making use of advanced pattern matching and abstract syntax trees, those tools perform code modifications programmatically, like changing lets that aren't reassigned to consts. That sounds simple enough, but when was the last time you worried about reviewing code for these minor details? It's probably been a while, and the rest of your time has been better spent because of it. As developers, the more parts of our job and processes that we can automate, the better. So why not scale this to framework updates? Some projects have. The NX team is certainly not the first to have had this idea. Angular has had ng update for many years at this point, a tool which most people have had varying levels of success with. The idea is simple. A new version of Angular is released, you type ng update in your terminal, and your project is migrated. Problem solved. However, its behavior can leave something to be desired, especially when working with projects that are on the larger side. Since all migrations are done in a single pass, if even one fails, you're out of luck. There's no option to adjust which migrations will be run based on your project's needs, or move at a more incremental pace than provided out of the box. It's like trying to carry all of your groceries inside in one trip. When it works, you feel awesome, like top of the world. But when it fails, you wish you could go back and take things a bit slower. It also doesn't play particularly well with custom NPM registries, which are quite common if you're using Angular without some sort of additional tooling. This forces strange workarounds for a tool that's supposed to be helpful, which is counterintuitive. Finally, ng-update only works for Angular projects, which means there will always be use cases it can't cover. We need an evolution. And that evolution is NX migrate. Okay, so just as an aside, this is the first thing some people might actually tweet at me about, so to be clear, I knew enough Pokemon lore to create this analogy, and I'm aware Mewtwo isn't actually an evolution of Mew. But I also did some research to confirm that Mewtwo is canonically more powerful than Mew, so I think this still holds. I digress. Back to updates. At a high level, NX Migrate is a significantly more advanced version of NG Update. It can even run migrations built for NG Update, so there's no overhead for switching. How does it work? NX first takes a look at your package JSON to determine which narwhal packages your workspace is using. From there, it can evaluate what versions you are currently using and build up a list of migrations that need to be performed to arrive at that new version. Once this list is created, NX will automatically install the new versions of packages and prompt you to verify everything looks good. From there, you can sit back and let NX handle the rest. We understand that migrating can be a bit finicky at times when you have a larger workspace, so there are a lot of additional quality of life features baked in. Things like flexibility over which migrations you want to run. Maybe you're not ready for a particular update. Committing in a partially migrated state, this makes the process more smooth if something unexpected goes wrong. Or changing versions of specific packages to match organization requirements. Dependencies of dependencies can be a headache, so you can override narwhal recommended versions. One of the core tenets of NX is incremental actions. With NX Migrate, you aren't locked into a certain granularity of updates. If a major version of NX ships with 6 different migrations, you can split those out one at a time to make sure the process runs smoothly. This greatly increases the flexibility of when and how you can choose to update. NX Migrate is also framework independent, meaning that there's nothing tying it to a specific stack. This means you get first-party support for all narwhal packages, and community members that ship plugins can hook into the system extremely easily. The NX core team has gained a lot of experience migrating large workspaces over the last 4 years, and NX Migrate has been consistently more reliable and easier to use. But it's easy to talk about the benefits, so let's see them in action. It's demo time. This is the Small Cats workspace, which contains the remnants of yet another side project that has come to pass. The idea here was to create the next focused social media sensation, using one of the internet's favorite subjects, small cats. I didn't get very far on it, so you can see that there's only a single app in here, called Web. It's been quite a while since I've worked on this, so let's take a look at package.json and figure out how out of date we are. Whoa! All my narwhal packages are on version 10. It's really been a year since I touched this project? Maybe I should stop impulsively generating these workspaces. Well, I've recently been re-inspired to work on this incredibly valuable project, so we're going to go through this update together. Let's open a new terminal window and get going. I want to make sure that I'm on the latest of every package, but since the NX and Next teams are shipping improvements so continuously, I don't know what the latest version number is. We're going to let NX take care of figuring that out by using NX Migrate latest. What's going on behind the scenes while this runs? Well, NX is taking a look at all of our installed packages and preparing a list of migrations that need to be run to get to our targeted version. You can see that we're trying to move all the way to 12.9.0, which means we've got quite a large migration on our hands. We'll speed this up because it's no fun to watch packages download. And the migrate command has been run successfully. Does this mean that I'm ready to get to work? Well, not quite. We've been notified that two things have happened. Package.json has been changed, and a migrations JSON has been created. Let's look at these one at a time. Back over in package.json, a lot of my dependencies have been updated. Great. Let's do a sanity check over these new values, and we're good to run npm install. I don't see anything glaring here, so let's hit npm install and fast forward again. Our install completed successfully, so now let's take a look at migrations.json. Even though this file is a few hundred lines long, it's actually pretty easy to understand. NX has determined all the individual migrations we needed to run to get from our start version, which was somewhere in version 10, all the way up to latest, which is version 12.9.0. The version property of each of these entries tells us which version of NX this migration came from, while the package property tells us which narwhal package, or third-party plugin, is trying to perform a migration. The description and name properties both provide information about what the migration hopes to achieve, and factory points NX to the actual code to run to complete a migration. Pretty straightforward. We can see that there's a variety of different packages listed here. After all, we are incrementing 2 full major versions. To finish up, we'll simply run nx migrate --run -migrations and let that go. And just like that, our workspace is migrated. Let's make sure it still works with some good old nx-serve. This is promising. We can see that Webpack 5 is enabled and the build succeeded. Back to the slides. That was an overwhelming success. We jumped multiple major versions for both NX and Next.js without a single issue, other than some long npm install times. Now that this is complete, we can delete the migrations.json file and move on with our project. Now, that was obviously an incredibly simple project, but adding additional complexity doesn't necessarily break this process. More often than not, the migrations will work properly out of the box. Occasionally, though, there will be oddities related to something specific to your organization's implementation. So, let's go over some strategies to keep things running smoothly. In our example, we jumped immediately from version 10.4.5 all the way to version 12.9.0. While this can technically work in a larger project, NX workspaces are open-ended enough that we can't expect to catch all of the edge cases regarding your specific configuration. This means it's always safer to upgrade in smaller pieces. If you're working with a large team, you might prefer doing this anyway, as it can vastly reduce the complexity of conflicts you'll receive when checking in your code. So, when we refer to incremental updates, do we mean running a migration for every single minor and patch version that's released? Well, no, unless you want to. But if you're having trouble, it will help isolate the problem to a specific migration by lessening the amount of work that's being performed on your workspace. In most cases, you should be able to get away with going to the latest release for your current major version, then migrating through additional major versions one by one from there. Let's say that we're on version 11.3.2 and we want to update to latest incrementally. The recommended path would be to first update to 11.6.3, which is the last official release on major version 11. To do this, we would run nx migrate 11.6.3. Note that we've added the version number after nx migrate. After this has been completed successfully, we can commit, maybe even open a pull request, and then repeat the process with version 12.9.0, once again passing it as an argument to the nx migrate command. Our workspace has been migrated in just 2 steps. A good additional sanity check to run is to test your builds and unit tests after migrating to any new version. Sometimes defaults and tools that are bundled with NX can change, resulting in occasional false positives, and it's always good to catch those early rather than after 5 or 6 migrations have run. Another piece to note is that NX migrators are unaware of any additional dependencies you might have installed. It's important to check your package JSON carefully before running migrations because mismatched dependencies can cause very strange and difficult to debug errors. This is something I've personally experienced. I'd recommend specifically looking at test utility libraries, anything from the @types namespace, and framework-specific integrations. What happens if you're in the middle of upgrading your workspace, but another team suddenly merges a long-lived feature branch that adds several new libraries, or even a new app? Those projects don't have your updates. Do we need to start over? Well, no, and there's no need to panic. Since NX Migrate stores all of the migrations that need to be run in the migrations JSON file, you can easily rerun migrations with no issues. This can be a lifesaver, since it's incredibly unlikely you'll be able to convince your team to have a code freeze while you migrate. What if you've tried the smallest possible unit of upgrading, and you're still having trouble? Well, remember that it's possible to manually edit the migrations.json file, and use that to your advantage. You can always move a problematic migration into a separate file, run the working ones, and commit those. This will give you a faster and more consistent experience while trying to figure out what's going wrong with the lone migration. You can tell NX to use manually created migration files by adding a file name after the --run-migrations flag. If you've done due diligence and believe that a migration is failing due to a mistake on the narwhal side, please submit a report to us on GitHub. We want the experience to be as smooth as possible. All of the examples we've gone over so far have been pretty centered on the packages that we ship firsthand here at Narwhal. However, migrators are not exclusive to the first-party portions of NX. Depending on the talks you've attended so far, or how deeply you've browsed the nx.dev site docs, you may be aware that NX also has a robust plugin system. When people think about plugins, the first things that may come to mind are generators, which add and modify workspace code, and executors, which assist in running commands, that help them use their favorite libraries in their workspace. But plugin authors can also provide their own migrators. How is this done? Well, if you are a plugin author, we provide generators to add empty migrations to your project, easily by running nxgenerate @narwhal nxplugin migration. You'll be prompted for the project name and which version number that this migration will be targeting. Now you're probably thinking, that's a pretty quick process, but now there's another layer to NX that I have to learn? This is getting kind of heavy. Well, not at all. You can think of migrators as normal generators that get triggered by a specific version of your plugin being installed. This means you get to use the incredibly powerful NX Dev Kit and all of the tools it has to offer to help create your migrations. You're also using the same tools that the NX core team uses for our plugins, so if you're ever stumped, you can take a look at the NX repo. We've likely had to solve some of the same problems you'll face on your quest. For additional resources, I'd strongly recommend checking out Yuri's talk on generators, executors, and NX plugins. Maybe you got a chance to catch it yesterday, but otherwise, be on the lookout for the recording. You can also check the documentation we have available on NXDev. As we wrap up, I hope the prospect of updating your workspace is seeming a bit less grim. Let's do a brief recap of the items we covered to keep everything fresh. We started talking about the problem that most of us have faced. It's hard to get time for upgrades, and even harder to actually perform them. We then introduced NX Migrate, and talked about the flexibility that it provides in the upgrading workflow, with the ability to pick and choose which migrations you like to run, as well as allowing you to commit at any time, providing a safe restore point if something fails. We showed that running migrations doesn't need to be time consuming, and went over some gotchas to check for when migrating your own workspace. And finally, we started to put the tools in your hands through NX plugin migrators. We put a lot of effort into making sure the developer experience with NX is great. So hopefully you've learned about something that you can bring back to your organization to help stay evergreen, or at the very least, kind of green. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I'm available for questions or comments on Twitter @StalkAltan, but otherwise, I'll see everyone in the Q&A session. Thanks so much for watching.